Persephone was not saved. She was returned. And that is not the same thing. We know this story as an abduction, a girl in a meadow, a flower, a crack in the earth, Hades, a scream, then darkness. But perhaps the most important moment was not the taking. Perhaps it was the bite. Because if Persephone was only a victim, why does her story not end with rescue? Why does she not simply return and become the girl she was before? Why does she later sit on a throne? And why does the underworld seem as if it had been waiting for its queen? Perhaps Kor was not stolen. Perhaps Persephone was recognized. Perhaps this is not historical truth. But it is the truth the myth itself reveals. The story begins in the light. Kor is gathering flowers. That is still her name then. Kor, the Maiden. A name so harmless it sounds as if someone deliberately forgot to mention what was hidden beneath it. She is Demeter's daughter. Demeter is the goddess of grain, fields, harvest, mothers, and order. In Demeter's world, everything has its place. Seeds fall into the earth, plants grow, humans harvest, the gods receive offerings, the seasons follow a rhythm, and Kor is the young face of that order. She is blossom before fruit, spring before anyone thinks of winter. But on this day, among all the flowers, there is one that should not have grown there. A narcissus, too beautiful, too striking, too wrong. Not like something that had grown by chance, more like something that had been placed there. Kor sees it. The other girls are nearby. The air is soft. The ground seems safe. Somewhere behind her still lies the life where daughters are called home in the evening. Then Kor reaches out her hand, and in the moment she touches the flower, the world loses its surface. The earth tears open. Black horses break out of the depths. A chariot rises from a place that should never see daylight. Hades appears, not as a devil, not as a demon, not as the burning ruler of some later hell. Hades is quieter than that. He is the god of what everyone knows and no one controls. He is not evil. He is the inevitable. Before anyone can react, Kor is on the chariot. She screams. Then the earth closes. And the most unsettling thing is not that she has vanished. The most unsettling thing is how quickly the world looks normal again. The flowers are still standing. The wind moves the grass. The sun falls on the same meadow, as if the ground had not just swallowed a girl, but one person hears the scream, Demeter, and from that moment on, the world begins to die. Demeter does not search for her daughter like a goddess fulfilling a duty. She searches like a mother whose body already knows that something can return and still remain lost. She takes torches. She walks across the earth. She questions mortals. She questions gods. She does not eat. She does not rest. And while Demeter searches, the fields remain empty. The seed does not open. The grain no longer rises from the soil. People starve. Altars grow cold. Offerings cease. Suddenly, even the gods realize that Demeter's grief is not private. When humans starve, they do not sacrifice. When no offerings rise, even Olympus grows silent. Here, the simple story breaks for the first time. Demeter does not beg. She holds the cosmos hostage. If the deep keep her child, the surface gets nothing more. No grain, no bread, no future. Not because she is cruel, but because a mother whose child has been taken by the depths gives nothing more to the surface. Zeus has to act, not because he is just, but because his order is collapsing. So he sends Hermes, the god of roads, of thresholds, of messages, the only one who can move between above and below without fully belonging to either side. Hermes descends, past everything that lives, past voice, light, and breath, down into the realm from which no one simply returns. And there he finds her, but not truly Kor anymore. That sounds like a detail. It is not, because a human being can be taken to a place, but a goddess can take another form there. Hermes does not simply find an abducted girl. He finds Persephone, in the depths, among shadows, in a realm whose rules seem older than Zeus himself. And there is one rule more important than all the others: eat nothing. Whoever eats in the underworld belongs to it, not perhaps, not metaphorically, not only in feeling, but according to the logic of myth. Eating is belonging. What enters a body does not stay outside. It begins to make a claim. And this is exactly where the moment happens that changes everything. Persephone is supposed to return. Demeter is supposed to see her daughter again. The earth is supposed to grow again. Humans are supposed to offer again. Zeus wants his order back. Everything could become as it was before. Almost. Because before Persephone leaves, Hades gives her pomegranate seeds. Small, red, gleaming, like blood that has found a shape. And the myth does not say that she screams. It does not say that she fights. It does not even say that she does not understand. It only says, she eats. That is the moment. Not the chariot, not the crack, not the scream. This bite. Because from now on, the pomegranate is no longer a fruit. It is a key, and Persephone swallows it. From now on, she belongs to the underworld. Not entirely, but enough. Enough for Demeter to get her daughter back, but never completely. Enough for Hades to lose his queen, but never finally. Enough for Persephone to move between two worlds from then on, without ever belonging only to one of them again. Part of the year in the light, part of the year in the depths. When she returns, the earth blooms. When she descends, Demeter grieves, and the world grows barren. That is how the seasons are explained. But this explanation is too clean, too smooth. It sounds as if someone took a wound in the world and turned it into a calendar. Because the myth does not answer the most important question. If Persephone was only a victim, why is she not simply freed? Why does she not become core again? Why does the underworld later need not only Hades, but also her? Why does the girl in the meadow not become a girl returned home? Why does she become a ruler? That only makes sense if the abduction is not the whole story. Perhaps it is the disguise. And here, the myth betrays itself. Because suddenly it sounds as if two stories have been violently pushed into one another. Above is core, the girl who can be searched for. The daughter, a mother, is allowed to demand back. The flower in the meadow, the one who is lost. Below is Persephone, the queen no one retrieves, the threshold between life and death, the power that does not seem abducted, but expected. Perhaps people needed a bright story. A daughter can be mourned, an abduction can be told, but a young goddess who belonged to the underworld from the beginning is harder to endure. So she is given a meadow, a mother, a flower, a scream, and suddenly it looks as if the underworld came to take her. But perhaps it did not come as a thief. Perhaps it came as a memory. Perhaps core was not stolen. Perhaps Persephone was recognized. And that is exactly what makes Demeter's grief even more tragic. Because Demeter is not wrong. She truly loses her child. But she does not lose her only to Hades. She loses her to something that had already been hidden beneath the name core. Demeter searches for the girl who picked flowers, the daughter who was supposed to come home, the life before it was touched by the depths. And she gets her daughter back, but not the girl, not entirely, because some places return people without releasing them. Persephone returns to the light, but she brings something with her, knowledge. She now knows that the earth does not only nourish, it devours. She knows that the same ground that grows grain also receives bodies. She knows that every field is a surface, and beneath every surface, something waits. That is the moment core ends. Not because she dies, but because she has seen too much to be only a daughter again. And the fact that the Greeks themselves knew there was more hidden in this story becomes clear in what they did with it. They did not simply keep telling it, they hid it. In Eleusis, The mysteries of Demeter and Persephone were held. Rites the initiated were not allowed to speak about. If Persephone had only explained why winter and spring come, there would have been no need for silence. Eleusis was not a lesson, it was a threshold. Torches, darkness, grain, descent, return. People did not come for an explanation, they came to meet a question. What happens when we go into the earth? And Persephone was the only goddess who did not answer that question from the outside. She knew both sides. She had picked flowers, and she had sat on the throne of the dead. From here on, Persephone is no longer missing. Not the vanished girl, not only the daughter inside her mother's grief, not the woman in Hades' shadow. She is the queen through whom the underworld receives a voice. In modern retellings, Hades often seems like the center, the dark king, the lord of the dead, the owner of the realm. But the myth is more unsettling, because Persephone does not sit there like decoration beside a powerful man. She receives the dead. She appears as a power even heroes must approach. Whoever enters the underworld does not enter only Hades' realm, they enter hers. And that changes everything retroactively, because if Persephone possesses power there, then the pomegranate was not only a trap, it was a bond. Perhaps even a contract. Hades gives her the seeds, Persephone eats, and from that moment on, she is not simply captive, she is involved, not free in the modern sense, not unharmed, not without violence, but transformed. And that is darker than a simple victim story. Because it means the underworld took her old life, but it gave her something the surface could never give her: power. Persephone cannot return to the old world, not completely. The light takes her back, but it no longer owns her. The underworld calls her, but it does not own her completely either. She is the door between them, and doors are dangerous, because they prove that separate rooms can touch. That is exactly why Persephone is more unsettling than Hades. Hades stays below. He is distant, final, still. But Persephone moves. She returns. She descends again. She brings the underworld into spring, and spring into the underworld. She turns the boundary into a wound. That is why every spring in this myth is not simply a new beginning. It is a return from the realm of the dead. And that is why every winter is not simply cold. It is the memory that everything living must eventually go down again. This is the horror the abduction story hides. Not that a girl is dragged into darkness, but that she returns, and that the darkness returns with her. Perhaps that is why this story still works today. Not because of Hades, not because of black crowns, not because of the aesthetic of a dark queen, but because people know this experience, returning and still not arriving. The world speaks the old name. It sees core. It expects the girl who existed before the depths. But that girl does not come back. Not entirely. Something stayed below, and something from below came back with her. She returns, but she is not restored. In the end, Persephone stands between all powers. Demeter wants return. Hades wants binding. Zeus wants order. Humans want harvest. But Persephone becomes something no one can fully control anymore. Not Demeter, not Hades, not Zeus. She becomes the rhythm itself. Down, up, down, up. Every year the same thing happens, and every year people pretend it is only nature. Autumn, winter, spring, summer. But the myth says something more uncomfortable. Return is never innocent. What comes back has been elsewhere. What blooms has been buried. What lives is always already bound to what will one day take it. And Persephone does not warn against this connection. She rules over it. Perhaps she was not only abducted. Perhaps she was not only saved. Perhaps only the bright name fell away from her. Core, the girl, the flower in the meadow. And beneath it appeared the name the underworld had already known. Persephone, the queen who ate the key. The ruler who was allowed to return, and the only figure in Greek myth who proves that one can come back from the depths, but never without bringing something from below back with her. because whoever returns from the underworld always brings something that is no longer used to the light. Some names are not names, they are masks. If Kor was one of them, then perhaps Persephone never disappeared. She was only hidden beneath it. The final question remains: was the pomegranate a trap or a contract? In the comments, one word is enough: trap or contract. And whoever wants to know which myths hide something darker beneath their familiar surface stays on forgotten paths.